Usually, when we talk about threats to the Imperium, we're discussing regional disasters or sector-wide catastrophes, but the Arcs of Omen campaign was different. This was a galaxy-spanning event that was probably the closest that Abaddon the Despoiler has come so far to achieving his ultimate goal of destroying humanity's greatest bastion. But even more terrifying was what his ally Vashtorr the Arkifane was attempting in this story, a ritual to become the 5th Chaos God. But first, we need some context about how this catastrophic alliance even formed. Around the year 100 of the 42nd millennium, in the aftermath of the fall of Cadia, Abaddon the Despoiler found himself facing a familiar problem. Despite his victory in the 13th Black Crusade and the successful splitting of the galaxy in half, the Imperium stubbornly refused to collapse. Abaddon had learnt that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to topple an empire that had survived everything the galaxy could throw at it for over 10 millennia. To finally wipe out humanity, he needed something more devastating than another conventional assault. He needed an ally whose power complemented his own strategic genius. That ally came in the form of Vashtorr the Arkifane. Vashtorr wasn't aligned with any single Chaos God. Instead, he served Chaos Undivided, which gave him authority over aspects that the 4 primary gods couldn't directly control. Specifically, Vashtorr ruled over dark technology, forbidden knowledge, and corrupted machinery. Every demon engine that rolled across the battlefield, every piece of heretic technology that emerged from a dark mechanicum forge, all of these fell under Vashtorr's dominion. The Arkifane had grown tired of serving the established pantheon of chaos gods. He now wanted to join them as an equal, and he had discovered that the ascension was possible. But it would require a feat of unprecedented scale and audacity. Ancient records spoke of fragments of a primordial technological artifact scattered across the galaxy, components of something called the Key, a device that predated even the Dark Age of technology. When assembled, these fragments would create a machine capable of tearing permanent holes in the fabric of reality itself. If Vashtorr could activate it successfully, the psychic shockwave would elevate him to godhood. Realising Abaddon's goals could serve his own, he approached him with a deal. If the Warmaster of Chaos helped him collect the fragments of the key, he would grant him the power to wipe out the Imperium for good, and so a powerful alliance was forged. There was just one last problem. Most of these fragments were hidden in the most heavily defended locations in Imperial space. Conventional attacks would fail, even with the forces of chaos at their disposal. They needed something bigger, so, together, they conceived of the Arcs of Omen. The Arcs of Omen represented a fusion of Abaddon's strategic vision and Vashtorr's technological mastery. Each arc began as the Space Hulk, massive accumulations of fused starships that drifted through the warp for millennia. Using his mastery over dark technology, Vashtorr reforged these derelict masses into corrupted weapons of mass destruction. The result was a fleet of mobile fortress cities, each one capable of laying siege to entire star systems. But what made the Arcs even more terrifying is that they could strike anywhere in the galaxy with minimal warning. These strikes would be both surgical and apocalyptic in scale. The first major target Vashtorr selected was the Rock, the fortress-monastery of the Dark Angels and one of the most impregnable fortresses in all of Imperial space. Deep within the Rock's core lay the Tucholcha engine, one of 3 sentient navigational devices created during the Dark Age of technology and also one of the key fragments needed to complete the key. The Dark Angels had guarded this secret for 10 millennia, but the Dark Angels were not prepared for what was soon to come. When the Arc of Omen materialised in the Rock's vicinity, it brought with it a demonic incursion of unprecedented scale. Demon engines phased directly through the monastery's outer defences. Corrupted scrap code invaded the Rock's ancient machine spirits. The Dark Angels soon found themselves fighting a battle unlike anything in their 10,000-year history. Vashtorr's first assault on the Rock was a failure. Despite the overwhelming force of his Arc of Omen and demonic legions, the Dark Angels' defense held, and the Arkifane was forced to retreat without securing the Tucholcha engine. What the Dark Angels didn't know was that Lionel Jonson had woken up recently and had been acting in the shadows for a while, using mysterious abilities to traverse the spirit paths of ancient Caliban's forests. He had been hunting the fallen across the galaxy, determining their loyalty and either redeeming the faithful ones as the Risen, or executing those who had turned to chaos with his blade, Fealty. Commander Dante of the Blood Angels, one of the Imperium's most experienced leaders, had been tracking strange reports across the galaxy. whispered sightings of an avenging angel, chaos warbands found slaughtered with surgical precision, and fallen angels mysteriously disappearing from known hideouts. When Dante finally located the lion, the ancient chapter master was shocked to discover that his suspicions were correct. The assault on the rock forced the lion to abandon his covert operations. Seeing his sons under attack by Vashtorr's forces, he finally revealed himself to Dante and accepted the Blood Angels' aid. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dark Angels would not fight alone. The lion's intelligence network had been tracking Vashtorr's movements, and he quickly realised that the Arkifane's assault on the rock was just the beginning. While the Dark Angels reeled from the assault on the rock and the lion coordinated with his new allies, Vashtorr's agents had located another fragment of the key on the world of Malakbael. This discovery came through the efforts of Inquisitor Gloria Magna, a servant of the Imperial Inquisition who had no idea that her archaeological work was about to trigger one of the bloodiest battles of the entire campaign. Magna had uncovered what Imperial records identified as an ancient psychic beacon called the Choral Engine. This device dated back to the Dark Age of technology and was designed to coordinate Imperial forces across vast distances through psychic resonance. For the defenders of Malakbael, the discovery seemed like a gift from the Emperor himself. The galaxy had been split by the Great Rift, making communication and coordination between Imperial forces increasingly difficult. A functioning psychic beacon could potentially restore contact with isolated sectors. The Choral Engine was activated with all appropriate prayers and rituals. The device was indeed capable of broadcasting coordinated psychic signals across vast distances. But the psychic light it generated was not free from consequences. Angron, the demon Primarch of the World Eaters, was driven into an absolute fury by the beacon's psychic emanations. The Red Angel descended upon Malakbael like a living storm of violence. Angron's descent upon Malakbael initially appeared to be nothing more than a mindless rampage, but then something unprecedented happened. Angron, who was supposedly consumed by endless rage and incapable of coherent thought, started organising his World Eaters into a sophisticated formation. He deployed them in what military analysts would later identify as trident formations. 3 coordinated spearheads that systematically dismantled the planet's defences with calculated precision. This was absolutely terrifying for the Imperium to witness. They had faced Angron before and developed strategies for dealing with this mindless fury, but an Angron capable of both unlimited fury and strategic brilliance represented a threat that existing Imperial doctrine was completely unprepared to handle. The final defenders of Malakbael were 60 Grey Knights, the Imperium's most elite demon hunters. These Space Marines were specifically trained and equipped to face the greatest servants of chaos, their weapons blessed with the Emperor's own power, their minds fortified against demonic corruption. But ultimately, even the Grey Knights couldn't stand against a demon Primarch who combined limitless rage with tactical genius. Their heroic last stand bought precious time, but it wasn't enough to change the outcome. Angron destroyed the Choral Engine, eliminating another crucial piece of Imperial coordination technology. But more importantly for Vashtorr's plan, on Malakbael, the second fragment of the key was found and retrieved. The key was beginning to take shape. While Vashtorr was assaulting the rock and the lion was revealing himself, another front in his galaxy-spanning campaign was unfolding thousands of light years away. Commander Farsight of the Tau Empire found himself facing the War of Daka, a conflict that would force him to completely reimagine Tau warfare. War boss Nazdreg had developed an obsession with beating the Tau at their own speciality, ranged firepower. His boys carried unprecedented numbers of shooty weapons, creating a green tide from firepower rivaling Tau pulse technology. The Orcs were outgunning the Tau Empire's finest marksmen. For Farsight, this represented an existential threat. The Tau had built their entire military doctrine around superior firepower. When Orcs started matching their shooting, Tau warfare fundamentals collapsed. Farsight's response was revolutionary. He developed the Way of the Short Blade. Aggressive hit-and-run tactics engaging Orcs at point-blank range, using superior mobility to negate numerical advantages. He created specialised recovery corps to strip every battlefield clean of wreckage, denying the Orcs the scrap metal they needed. Without salvage, frustrated mech boys abandoned Nazdreg's Wag. The strategy worked brilliantly. As Orc forces weakened, Farsight struck Nazdreg's fortress world of Dregrock with surgical precision. In the climactic battle, Nazdreg disappeared into a massive vortex implosion. Victory was complete. Or so it seemed. Just as Tau forces withdrew from Dregrock, reality began tearing apart. The Ark of Omen, unhollowed, materialised like a nightmare, bringing demon priest Ugalax's Chaos Baal fleet. Vashtor's agents had monitored the entire conflict. Hidden on Arthur's Moloch lay another key fragment needed for his ascension ritual. The timing was no coincidence. Farsight faced an impossible choice. His depleted forces could retreat, abandoning Arthur's Moloch to chaos and giving Vashtorr his key fragment, or they could fight Ugalax's fresh force and face complete destruction. Despite the odds, Farsight chose to fight. The battles that followed were among the most vicious of the Arcs of Omen campaign. Farsight commanded a fighting retreat across multiple star systems as Chaos forces pursued his armies. Remnants of Nazdreg's orcs created a three-way nightmare where survival meant adapting to threats from every direction. The Farsight Enclave survived, but at an enormous cost. Vashtor's campaign was succeeding because it forced every faction to fight for survival, preventing coordinated resistance. While Lionel Jonson raced towards Wormwood, Farsight was fighting for his people's survival thousands of light years away, exactly as the Arkifane had planned. With multiple fragments secured and the Imperium reeling from repeated precision strikes, Vashtorr made his next move. He retreated to Wormwood, the corrupted remains of Caliban, the Dark Angels' original home world. 10,000 years ago, this had been a proud world, home to knightly orders ruled by Lionel Jonson himself. But the betrayal of Luther and the fallen angels had torn the planet apart. What remained was a dead world, twisted by 10,000 years of warp exposure into something barely recognisable as a former Imperial planet. The landscape was a nightmare of corrupted forests, twisted metal, and reality warping anomalies where the psychic laws of the universe no longer applied consistently. For Vashtor's purposes, this made Wormwood perfect. He needed a location where the barriers between reality and the warp were already thin, where massive rituals could be conducted without immediately attracting the attention of Imperial forces. Caliban's corrupted remains provided exactly what he needed. But there was also a deeper symbolism at work. By choosing the Dark Angels' lost homeworld as the site for his ascension ritual, Vashtorr was making a statement about the futility of Imperial resistance. The Lion wasn't just about to let this happen. The Primarch of the Dark Angels had been preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation since revealing himself to Dante. The alliance between the Dark Angels and Blood Angels brought together two of Imperium's most elite Space Marine chapters. While the Lion rallied Imperial forces, Vashtorr had been busy with his own preparations. He'd successfully assembled the key from all the fragments he'd collected across the galaxy. The completed key was unlike anything that had ever existed in the material universe. It combined the reality manipulation capabilities of the Emperor's failed Webway project with the raw power of bound greater demons and the precision of Archaeotech navigation systems. When activated, it would tear permanent Webway-like tunnels through the fabric of space-time itself, creating dimensional breaches that could serve as a gateway for Vashtor's ascension to godhood. Victory seemed within Vashtor's grasp, but the Arkifane had chosen the wrong world for his ascension. The Dark Angels and their Blood Angels allies were already en route to Wormwood, led by a Primarch who would never allow Caliban's desecration to go unanswered. When the Imperial forces arrived at Wormwood, they found themselves facing a nightmare that exceeded even their worst expectations. Vashtor's presence and the activation of the key had warped reality itself. To make things even worse for the Imperial defenders, Angron and his World Eaters had joined Vashtorr for the final assault. The battle began, and it was everything you'd expect from one of this magnitude. But within this larger battle, individual confrontations began to emerge that would determine the outcome of the entire campaign. Commander Dante, chapter master of the Blood Angels, found himself face to face with Angron himself, enhanced by the power of Khorne and now possessed of a strategic mind that could match his supernatural strength. The Red Angel had proven at Malakbael that he was no longer the mindless berserker that Imperial forces had learned to counter. Despite his incredible skill and experience, Commander Dante found himself outmatched. Angron's demonic power proved too much for even one of the Imperium's greatest champions, and the Red Angel found himself moments away from claiming another victory in his endless war against everything the Imperium had built. But that's when Lionel Jonson arrived. The Primarch of the Dark Angels had been racing across the corrupted landscape of Wyrmwood, fighting his way through demon engines and reality warping anomalies to reach the centre of Vashtorr's ritual. But when he saw Commander Dante falling before Angron's assault, the Lion made a tactical decision and rushed to his aid. The Lion's Blade, the legendary fealty that had been forged during the Great Crusade and blessed by the Emperor himself, met Angron's demon weapons in a clash that sent shockwaves across both the material universe and the warp. The battle between two Primarchs lived up to the hype, and ultimately, Lionel Jonson managed to defeat Angron with the Emperor's shield, sending the demon Primarch's essence screaming back into the realm of chaos. Now, the death of a demon Primarch is never truly permanent. Beings of such power can be reformed by their patron gods given enough time and energy. But Angron's banishment removed him from the battlefield at the most crucial possible moment, disrupting Vashtorr's plans and eliminating one of the most dangerous opponents in the battle. Despite the Lion's victory over Angron, the battle for Wormwood was far from over. While the Primarchs fought their epic duel, Vashtorr had been conducting his ascension ritual with the completed key. Reality began to fracture around the device, showing glimpses of the warp that lay beneath the surface of normal space-time. Dimensional breaches opened that functioned similarly to webway technology, but twisted by chaos into something that served the interests of the dark gods rather than facilitating safe travel. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like Vashtorr might actually succeed in his ultimate goal, and the fifth Chaos God was about to be born. The psychic shockwave generated by the ritual could be felt across entire sectors. On distant worlds, psychers collapsed as the warp itself seemed to convulse with the birth pangs of a new deity. Imperial navigators found their abilities disrupted as new currents of power began flowing through the Imperium. But despite achieving everything he had planned, despite successfully activating the key and creating permanent rifts in reality, Vashtorr ultimately failed to become the fifth Chaos God. The ritual worked exactly as the ancient texts had described. The technological components functioned perfectly, the dimensional breaches were created successfully, but Vashtorr was not given the transformation he had hoped for. The existing Chaos Gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle and Slaanesh, had no interest in sharing their powers with an upstart demon. The Pantheon of Chaos was complete as far as they were concerned. Vashtorr had created new permanent warp rifts and demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded anything the Imperium possessed, but he remained bound to his current status rather than ascending to true godhood. With Abaddon the Arkifane and his completed weapons vanished into the warp, leaving the Imperial forces victorious in battle, but defeated in the larger war. The conclusion of the Arcs of Omen campaign left the galaxy fundamentally changed. The Imperium had survived, but at a tremendous cost that would be felt for generations to come. Entire worlds had been devastated by the Arcs of Omen during their precision strikes across the galaxy. The rock had been damaged in ways that would take centuries to fully repair. Wormwood remained a corrupted wasteland that posed ongoing threats to navigation and Imperial security. The campaign had revealed fundamental vulnerabilities in Imperial defences that had gone unrecognised for millennia. The idea that coordinated strikes by technological superior enemies could crack open humanity's most secure fortresses represented a new type of threat that existing military doctrine was unprepared to address. The return of Lionel Jonson provided the Imperium with a powerful new champion, but it also highlighted just how dependent humanity's survival had become on the intervention of legendary figures. The fact that it took a Primarch to stop Vashtorr's plan suggested that the Imperium's regular military forces were insufficient to deal with threats of this magnitude. For the Dark Angels specifically, the campaign represented both vindication and a new beginning. The Lion's return had finally given them the leadership they'd been missing for 10,000 years, but it had also forced them to abandon their traditional isolation and begin working more closely with other Imperial factions. From Vashtorr's perspective, the campaign represented both a tremendous achievement and a bitter disappointment. The Arkifane had successfully demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded anything the Imperium possessed, but its ultimate goal of ascending to godhood remained unfulfilled. The new warp rifts created by the key continued to pose ongoing threats to Imperial navigation and security. Unlike the Great Rift created during the 13th Black Crusade, these smaller breaches were scattered across the galaxy in locations that had been specifically chosen for their strategic importance. They would continue to serve Chaos interests for millennia to come. Abaddon's role in the campaign had been characteristically calculating. The Warmaster of Chaos had allied with Vashtorr not because he particularly cared about the demon's ascension to godhood, but because the Alliance served its own long-term goals of weakening the Imperium. In this respect, the campaign had been a success regardless of its ultimate outcome.